usar de brasileiro para facilitar a dinâmica do painel. Eu vou conduzi-lo em inglês, mas na hora das perguntas, com todo prazer, a gente volta ao português se for necessário, tá ok? Let me start with the short presentation. I want to sort of set up the scene, give an overview of the existing carbon pricing mechanisms that today exist around the world. Just to clarify, I'm not sure if everybody gets clearly. So by carbon pricing mechanism, we include carbon taxes and what it's called emissions trading system, which is a mechanism that establishes a cap in the total emissions of a sector or a jurisdiction, could be a country or even a region. And then companies can decide whether they're going to reduce their emissions through investments towards a low carbon economy. So in other words, installing mega filters or changing their industrial technologies. Or the system allows companies that reduced emissions beyond the what they're or obliged, they can sell rights to pollute to other companies who could not do the same. In other words, the total system, the total sector is capped, and that's what it matters. And then the government will decide, or the regulator will decide at which rate these emissions have to be reduced year by year. So I'm going to give you a sense on what we see today around the world. Let me pass. I'm going to talk about this later. All right. So since there are a lot of data, let me get some information here as well. All right. Since 2016, we have seen 8 new carbon pricing mechanisms being implemented around the world. So just to mention a few, in 2016, we had 3 of these emissions trading systems, or ETSs, which I'm going to start using from now on. Those were in British Columbia, a province of Canada, Australia, and Fujian in China. Then in 2017, we had 2 more ETSs established already in Washington State. It was early this year, and Ontario also in Canada. And 3 carbon taxes. Interestingly, 1 in Canada, Alberta, 1 in Chile, when we have the pleasure to have 1 panelist that are going to tell us more about this carbon tax, and 1 in Mexico, in Colombia. Mexico also has 1 implemented since 2014, but Colombia, our neighbor, also established another carbon tax earlier this year. In case you haven't noticed, 6 out of the 8 latest carbon pricing developments came from this region, came from the Americas, and this is important. I'm going to refer to this later on. All right. Now with the newcomers, we see, well, you won't be able to read it, but I assume these presentations are going to be shared, and so you may have the list of all jurisdictions that today implement any of those policies or mechanisms to reduce emissions. 67 are, let me move to this slide, it's easier to see. So these are 67 jurisdictions which comprise 42 countries and 25 subnational jurisdictions, or cities, states, and regions. To give a sense on what they represent, these 67 encompass or include 7 out of the 10 largest global economies. The ones who do not have out of the 10 are Brazil, India, and Russia. All the other ones have a mechanism to reduce emissions. And combined, these jurisdictions represent half of the global economy. So we are not talking about something to start or to be implemented. We are talking about a reality. Combine these systems, also interesting number for you to have, they cover today 15% of total global emissions, or about 8 gigatons of CO2 equivalent per year. The world emits around 54 tons per year, gigatons per year. Now, let me switch a little bit from the environmental agenda and go more into a sustainable development agenda, or more into the fiscal agenda. These governments that have established one of these mechanisms have raised constantly in 2015 and 16 over $20 billion per year with the revenues coming from these mechanisms. In the case of carbon tax, it's easy to understand. It's pretty much the collection of all taxes that have been paid. In the case of the emissions trading system, is the fact that the governments sell or auction the allowances or the rights to pollute for companies to start this market mechanism. So when we combine the revenues of the sales of the rights to pollute and the tax, these governments have raised over $20 billion. And if prices go up to the level consistent with the Paris Agreement, this $20 billion will become $100 billion in 2020 already, in 2 years from now. Now, there is a reason, and probably this is the main reason to explain why these mechanisms are popping up so largely in the lately, and that's exactly the fact that carbon pricing, or these market mechanisms, are no longer seen as an environmental agenda or environmental tool. They obviously reduce emissions, and they were the primary objective for them to exist, but probably more important, they are strong fiscal tools that increases revenues efficiently to government, allowing them to reduce or eliminate other policies that are undesirable or sometimes even countervailing. And in addition, these mechanisms result in substantial technological and financial transfers because they drive investments to low-carbon economy, to the sustainable development economy we are talking about in this event. And they obviously spur technological innovation because those new technologies, the most critical, the cleanest and more efficient technologies are the ones that are going to receive the natural investments under these policies. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to stop and allow our colleagues to say. When I said that if carbon pricing mechanisms, if prices reach the goals of the Paris Agreement, this 20 becomes 100. Why they are not that yet? Because we do know the political challenge faced by governments to implement ambitious policies like these, including the concerns from private sector in terms of competitiveness, in terms of raising energy prices, in terms of leakage, in terms of how the households are going to be dealing with these. And we had the opportunity to talk over the lunch with Dr. Shelley that in Brazil particularly, we have so many small business here, and what is going to happen to them, how they are going to react, how we're going to be able to get involved in this. I'm not going to continue. I'm going to allow our distinguished panelists to give their national perspectives, and then we can start discussing about the need for an international cooperation, and more particularly what Brazil needs to do to become part of this agenda at regional and international level. So let me start with Dr. Wenbo. I think it was introduced already, so you may tell us about China, what China is doing. And just to give a hint, China is one of the countries that yet, he's going to explain, do not have a federal mechanism implemented, but today China is already the country that reduces most emissions just with some subnational pilots being implemented. Over 1 billion tons of CO2 per year are covered under these mechanisms. Okay, I stopped my presentation in the middle. Okay, there we go. I think the team here is going to help us to get Mr. Wenbo's presentation on the screens.
Yeah, okay.
There we go.
Thank you. And my name is Wenbo Liu from China. And today I would like to update the development of China's national ETS. Okay, this is my outline. I will introduce a little bit about the INDC from China and the relationship of the INDC and our policies. And then the progress of national ETS, which we are doing. And the last one is the effect of the carbon pricing. And for the INDC, the overall the quantifiable target in China's NDC, the Chinese INDC target was included in the INDC. The target is reduce the CO2 emission per unit of GDP by 40 to 45% by 2020. And by 60 to 60, okay, sorry, by 60 to 65% by 2030 from the 2005 baseline level. The current progress, the 2014 on this target is a reduction of CO2 by 33.8% based on the statistical data. In addition, the 13th National 5-Year Plan includes the commitments to achieve the peaking of the China CO2 emission around 2030, while making the best effort to peak earlier. And okay, this is the INDC. I would like to present the commitments in different sectors by 2020. The China NDC also includes a number of targets and communications in specific sectors, like reduce the non-fossil share, non-fossil share of primary energy consumption by 15% by 2020. Current progress is at 11.5% 0.2% based on the 2014 statistical data. Reduce the non-fossil share in case the forest area by 40 million hectares by 2020. The percentage progress in 2014 is the 21,600 hectares compared with the 2005 level. And the increased value of the forest stock volume of 13,000 million cubic meter by 2020. Present the forest stock volume is 2,188 million of cubic meter, based on the data from 2014. The geothermal energy utilization to 50 million tons by 2020, increase the installed capacity of hydropower, onshore wind, solar, and nuclear power to like 396 and 30 respectively. And I do not want to just sum up the data. I go to for the next, the INDC and the policies. The key policies and the measures in energy conservation and emission reduction in the 13th five-year plan will together support the China government to achieve the goal. The improvement of energy and emission metering, the statistics, monitoring and a large system, improve the industry and the energy construction, the development of for the measures and tools, we have several functions, measures. The most important for us is at present is the national ETS, and then this is also support the national plan and the five-year plan. For the regulations and the rules, also very important to support the measures in the implementation phase. So, okay, this is the national plan on climate change, 2014 to 2020. This is where the basic principle is written in the plan. Is we have four basic principles. The first is overall consideration on national and international. The second principle is the parallel advancement of mitigation and adaptation. The third is complementing the technical and the industrial innovation. The fourth principle is the government guidance and social participation. For the national plan on climate change, the measures of greenhouse gas control is also written. We have different measures. It's a list here. It's like readjust the industry structure. Like we want to reform the industrial structure. We want to improve the third industrial structures in industrial sectors, and optimize the energy structure, and strengthen the energy conservation. in the energy conservation, China did a lot of work, and whatever in the industry phase or in the public living. And then the increase the sink means the forest should be protected and development. And then the control the emission of the production sector. And then the control the emission of rural and the urban area. And control the emission of traffic sector. Like in Beijing, in the traffic sector, the Beijing government bought a lot of zero zone emission vehicles for the bus, and they gonna quit the benzene, the diesel buses maybe next year, or they have a schedule to quit the diesel bus. And control the emission of agriculture, business, and waste disposal, and initiative the low carbon life. All the measures of the control emission, they support to achieve the final target. And except this one, we also have the national ETS. Like in the working plan of the greenhouse gas emission control in the 13th five-year plan, this is a new plan for China, and within the plan is remarked with the highlight with the low carbon lead, the energy revolution, because before the 13th five-year plan, we do not say too much about the low carbon, but in this five-year plan, we say the carbon we do announce the low carbon, and the position is lead the energy revolution. So and then within this sector, we have the different measures to strengthen the carbon emission control in energy sector, and the strengthen energy conservation in some key sectors. We list into detail, and these working plan for the 13th five-year plan is almost same with the national plan on climate change. So I don't want to present very deep. And within this the five-year plan, maybe you are interested in the construction and operating the national ETS. The construction of the mechanism of ETS, we have a different sentence to describe. The first is issue the regulations on management of ETS and the related implementation rules. With this work, we actually, for the NDRC issued one ministry level of the regulations since 2014. But we are working for the higher level of the regulation in the state council level. Why we do this is state council level regulation, they have the right to do something not voluntary. It's mandatory things to give the power to the government, and let the government do the mandatory things. This is what we want to do, especially in the implementation phase and compliance, the final compliance phase of the ETS. And then the structure national, the status for the state council level regulations on management of ETS is we NDRC sub the draft regulation to the State Council already, and the State Council is reviewed by the regulation, and I don't know when it will be issued. For the next one, the structure construct the national province level, the two levels of management framework. Like in China, it's a central government and then the provinces. And for the central government and provinces in ETS, they have different duties. Like the central government, they make the standard and the rules how to make the allowance allocation. And the province level, they do the MRVs, and their duty is monitoring do the implementation phase and do the compliance, and also assist the central government to monitor or to governance the exchanges. And for the the implementation of the special fund and the working team. We have passed. We have construct 7 pilot regions and two more regional region ETS. Within that period, the local government construct their working team to support. To construct the working team, and China in 2012, they start the CCER, the Chinese Voluntary Emission Reduction Mechanisms, and it's somehow like the CDM in China, the local CDM in China. And there are like 5,000 before I came to Brazil. I make the statistics work. It's like 5,000 over 5,000 projects are registered in the CCER. So the CCER also helped the government to make the capacity building on the working team. And this is the working team. I would say the special fund. NDRC also seeking the help from the Ministry of Finance to get some money from them to create the special fund for supporting the national ETS. Especially in the verification, the MRV. So the next is the company about the 10,000 standard coal consumption in 8 sectors shall be integrated into ETS. This is the basic standard to entrance standard. Okay. This is a launching, the description about the launching and the operating of national ETS. But within the sentence, there's not clearly distinguished which sentence is launching and which is operating. But clearly, as the President Xi Jinping announced that China will be launched in this year. So. For the capacity building of the national ETS, we do such kind of work. I think most of them I have present. Like the first is the construct the registry, and exchange system, as well as their disaster backup system. And then construct a national local company MRV system. The third is construct the ETS trading center for the public uniform trading materials and evaluation standard, as well as the policy consultation platform. For the pilot demonstration in regions, the sector company level, and promote international cooperation. And then the tracking, researching on some key tasks of the ETS. This some key task at present is how to launch the national ETS. Yeah. Okay. Okay. The time is not so. I have to hurry up. For the next, I will strengthen the top level of the design about the national ETS. I would say the 1+3. One is the construction of national ETS. The 3 is the system construction and the capacity building and the infrastructure constructions. And this is our legislation framework milestones in 2014. As I mentioned, the NDRC issued released the ministry level regulation, and in the 2015, the draft regulation of national, the state council level regulation is submitted to the state council. And in this year, last year, the Legislative Affairs Office of the State Council start to review on it. And establishing the MRV system. The MRV is recounting the report, and some keyword is reporting. Key work is accounting the report, and complies third-party verifiers guidance and handbook. And the third is the construct or establish the greenhouse gas emission reporting system, and then to construct a group of the third-party verifiers. And this is our organizing of the historical data reporting and verification, also MRV. 8 means 8 sectors, including the petrochemical, chemical, and building materials, iron, steels, non-ferrous metals, paper making, the power and the aviation. For this number, this 6,700 is the company will be involved in the national ETS. And this is 100 plus means we have more than 100 verifiers or verifier entities. And this is a fact of carbon pricing. Some company allowances, the allowances of some company is not enough for sure, and some company is they have some allowances rich, but in generally it's balanced anyway, because some low efficient company in the ETS will low efficient company in ETS, they have to pay and buy from the high efficient company. This is the basic thinking of the ETS. and I'm very sure that we have different voices from the low efficiency company. They say, no, we don't like the ETS because we have to buy and we have to pay more cost. But we also get the feedback from some high efficiency company that we totally support the ETS because we gonna have the beneficial from the ETS, and it would be improved our export. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
I think the last slide summarizes quite well what's the principle here, that those market mechanisms are intrinsically part of a industrial and economic change towards a certain direction that the country wants to have, and we probably can extract that it's not an easy process out of the slides we've seen, but once we see the distribution of the industry towards the most efficient ones, we are pretty much directing the entire economy, making the least efficient companies to move quickly to the best standards. And then obviously the regulator or the country has the obligation here to support and help the least efficient companies to adapt through to this process. Eventually there are several mechanisms that can be used to do so, like reducing the initial costs or providing some of those allowances or rights to pollute for free. But anyway, the main objective is that towards the 2, 3, 5, 10 years, the economy shifts to the direction that is necessary. Thanks so much. Now let's hear a little more about the experience from Mexico. That is clearly one of the leaders in the Americas. It's very well positioned to lead this transition to the low carbon economy. They belong, as all you know, to the Pacific Alliance countries, which comprises Chile, Mexico, Peru, and Colombia. But at the same time, I'm sure Eduardo, who is very well connected to the government, will explain that MOUs have been signed with the North American subnational jurisdictions. So Mexico may well be the agent bringing all the Americas combined towards a regional system. Very much interested to hear what you have to say. All right.
Obrigado, muito obrigado e obrigado pelo convite à CNI, à CNI e à CESI. Eu sou o Eduardo Piquero, eu trabalho para a México CO2, estou falando português, falo um pouquinho de português, mas a apresentação será em inglês. E muito obrigado outra vez pelo convite. I'm going to switch to English now then. I represent a company called Mexico CO2. It's a private company that belongs to the Mexican Stock Exchange, is part of the Mexican Stock Exchange group. The Mexican Stock Exchange is a very small stock exchange compared to Bovespa in Sao Paulo. It has over 150 companies listed, whereas the Brazilian Stock Exchange has over 400. So yes, it's a smaller stock exchange. However, in a country very much hit by not only by natural disasters alone, but by climate change. Every year we get a couple of hurricanes, besides droughts and severe flooding in the south of the country. Those natural effects, the natural weather effects have become, as you know, more frequent. We have them This year is going to be a record year in terms of hurricanes registered in the Pacific and the Atlantic. So for a country such as Mexico, that is extremely vulnerable, that makes it extremely vulnerable, not only for its population alone, which is a social issue, but also for our economy. And for the sake of comparing, I've made a small chart between Mexico and Brazil, just to compare it, take a glimpse out of it. The two largest countries in the Americas in terms of population, over 200 million inhabitants in Brazil and over 127 million inhabitants in Mexico. It's the largest Spanish-speaking country in the world. However, in a total area, Brazil is, of course, one of the largest in the world. Mexico is almost 4 times smaller. But in that small area, the economy of the country, it's a bit more than the middle of the Brazilian economy, half of the Brazilian economy. Though very well distributed, Mexico exports almost double as is Brazil. So to the international trade, Mexico, it's extremely relevant. Of course, as you know, 80% of Mexican exports go to the US. And in the US, 35% go to California alone. California, a country with a carbon pricing mechanism. Several other states in the Union, in the United States, do hold a carbon price. So that makes it extremely important and vulnerable for our exports, or for Mexican exports, to the United States in terms of carbon pricing. In terms of emissions, our country, or Mexico, heavily depends on emissions on industry and manufacturing, mostly. And as I've just mentioned, a large portion of those manufacturing products go to the US. That again poses another reason for a carbon price in the country. Whereas emissions in Brazil heavily depend also in agriculture. So we do have different emissions pies, though, although, as you can see there, sectors are look-alike. With that in mind, I wouldn't have to mention that that climate change poses a risk for Mexican exports and for this strategy, the growth strategy, the strategy to grow the economy in the country. So at the very last year of the previous administration, President Felipe Calderón, he passed in the Congress the General Law on Climate Change, which is the mechanism to govern or to solve climate change issues. Most important of those, of the products of the law, is the creation of this interministerial commission on climate change to coordinate different measures among the government. As you know, government coordination, it's one of the several things you have to look into for carbon pricing. It enables also, it creates the National Emissions Registry, so companies in Mexico emitting over 25,000 tons of CO2 equivalent are required to report and verify their emissions to the government every year, and that will be the basis for an emissions trading scheme. The government has announced several times that Mexico will develop an emissions trading scheme, becoming the first country in Latin America to have an emissions trading scheme. The law also creates or gives power to the executive to create environmental fiscal instruments, such as what we call the carbon tax. It was passed as part of the continuation between the last president and this president, the current president's government. Back in 2014, a fiscal reform was approved that included that includes a carbon tax that is fixed around $2.50, somehow sort of 45 Mexican pesos, that it's only for fossil fuels. So it's more of a tax into fossil fuels than a real tax on CO2 or GHG's emissions. So all fossil fuels imported or produced in Mexico do have this tax. And believe me, that was not an easy law to pass. As of 2014, as to 2013, fossil fuels and electricity were still controlled by the government in Mexico, as it used to be for 70 years. So the liberalization and the energy reform that this government brought also the possibility of establishing a carbon tax into fossil fuels that were up to that date subsidized by the government. So that's been a game changer for private industry. The law also creates or sets a set of emission reduction goals for the country that go for 30% up in 3 years' time for 2020 and 50% for 2050. So up to that date, private sector was, to be honest, not that active in climate change in Mexico. And at the stock exchange, concern grew that, as we say in Spanish, nos iba a llevar la tristeza, that there was no way we can comply with this kind of goals unless we help companies comply with this kind of requirements. Emission reductions in a country such as Mexico, and I believe in all Latin America, will come from the private sector. And the private sector is not longer under the Kyoto Protocol. That protocol has ended, and the Kyoto Protocol and the CDM, Mecanismo para un Desarrollo Limpio, are not the same under the Paris Agreement. Under the Paris Agreement, countries are required to lower emissions locally. So if we are to lower emissions, we need to do it with Mexican money. The stock exchange created Mexico CO2 to develop environmental markets. Carbon market is one of them. And as a result of a series of unfortunate events, as I've told you, Mexico is a very vulnerable place to climate change, severe drought, hurricanes every now and then, and of course a series of natural disasters and frequent extreme weather effects. However, several economic events relate that climate change already exists, and companies are taking decisions with climate change in mind. You know Cancun in the Caribbean, close to beautiful Cuba and with those nice beaches, very nice, not that nice as in northern Brazil, but very nice. But it's a growing source of income for the country. Tourism is it's a huge source of income, and we're gonna get a lot of hurricanes. Do you know that a lot of hotels in those areas do not have insurance because the risk of getting hit by a hurricane is so high? It's so expensive to buy your insurance póliza, your segurança contra huracanes. It's so high they can't pay it. And it happens the same also in the Baja California Peninsula on the Pacific. So that calls the attention that hotel companies can't buy insurance policies that easily. At the same time, Mexico is paying some of the heaviest insurance policies on crops. The dependent on Mexican agriculture is so heavily influenced by weather effects that it's, again, extremely subsidized by the government. Those insurance companies are subsidized by the government. They get paid by the government so that agriculture companies are not paying for that. And finally, a series of companies have taken decisions related to climate change. For instance, one company last year had to expand its operations, one food and beverage company based in northern Mexico. The place in which they had operations, it didn't rain in 2 years. There was no rain in 2 years. They were getting water 2 kilometers below the surface. That was fossil water. So when they analyzed where they're gonna build their new plant, they decided to build it in Uruguay. So those jobs are now in Uruguay and not in Mexico. Nothing wrong with Uruguay, but we need to get ready for climate change in all countries. It's already hitting the economy, and it will do it harder in the years to come. So, as part of the Paris Agreement, those set of aspirational goals for emission reductions are now mandatory by law because of being a constitutional agreement, then it becomes mandatory by law. Moreover, again in 2015, the Energy Transition Law provided the mandate to the government to develop an emissions trading scheme only in the electricity sector, or only comprising the electricity sector. So the mandate or the power to do so, it's already there. With that in mind, what we foresee as the upcoming challenges in the private sector are, of course, addressing competitiveness, and one of them was to have a carbon price. Most of Mexican exports go to countries where carbon price is present. California is one of them, but other 9 different states in the United States do have a carbon price. 2 of the largest Canadian provinces have a carbon price, and of course China will soon have a carbon price. That's the second buyer of Mexican goods. So again, having a carbon price is part of the Mexican integration strategy in North America. It's not only an environmental thing, but it's part of the international integration of the economy. Our industry is heavily exposed to international trade, as you know. Mexico is an open economy with freedom of trade. The economy begins to transition from a heavily dependent oil and gas company to a renewable energy kind of market. We have a series of auctions every 3 or 4 months, and those auctions resulted in some of the lowest renewable energy prices worldwide. So we see the countries going green, whether the industry is on board or not, because it's already competitive. Renewable energy are already competitive in a growing series of ways. There is already a group established between government and the private sector to discuss how a cap and trade would look like in Mexico, especially and mostly in the cap, how the cap is going to be set. Even though there is agreement that Mexico needs a cap and trade, there is still a disagreement on how that cap will be set and how that would be adjusted. The Mexican government has announced that there is a deadline for the publishing of the rules of the ETS, of the emissions trading scheme, that is set to be next year. So before this government goes, we should have already the regulation for the cap and trade. For the next government, that will happen in 2019, will be ready to implement it. Mexico depends heavily on oil and gas revenues. There is only one oil company today in Mexico, Pemex, Petróleos Mexicanos, that almost everything they collect from the sale of their oil products and refined subproducts, they place it under the federal government. There is already a strategy underway to make the federal government not dependent on that oil and gas revenues. And of course, what we more need for the future government, that Mexico also holds election next year, is political will to continue on ETS. And that political will is only a part of what is needed. The other part we need is the will from the private sector to develop a carbon mechanism that provides flexibility, such as an ETS, and at the same time it protects it provides flexibility to comply with the obligations that the country has. And on the other side, the other possibility would be a heavier carbon tax. With that in mind, just to finish, the stock exchange will be running from October the 30th, if everything goes all right. An ETS simulation, such as the one running in Brazil, in this case will run from the stock exchange. It's a joint project between the Mexican Stock Exchange, as I said, a private company, and the Ministry of Environment, Semarnat, Secretaría de Medio Ambiente y Recursos Naturales. And the objective is to create capabilities within the private sector to discuss with government how an ETS would look like. Perhaps it happens the same to you, but when you talk about carbon, when you talk about climate change, or even when you talk about an emissions trading scheme, you keep on talking to the same people, always, and it's always the same people from the other side. If we're going to have an ETS, a broad ETS that covers a lot of sectors, we need the more sectors participating in the discussions. So that's the main reason why we're running this simulation. More than 90 companies are participating in this simulation, from aviation, chemical and petrochemical industry, the cement and lime industries, ceramics, iron and steel, oil and gas, pulp and paper, etc. It's all in all, it's almost covering 65% of all national emissions. So that would give us a good base to start working on creating capabilities within the private sector. It will have 3 different phases. It will start with a very simple approach, and we will end up with the same rules and parameters that run the Californian ETS, which is where we want to go. There is already an existing agreement between Mexico, California, Quebec, Ontario, that we will develop a joint carbon market and an emissions trading scheme. And the role of Mexico there will be to provide, most likely, reductions to the richest subnational governments. We do have an advisory committee that is composed by California, Quebec, Ontario, of course, some Mexican subnational governments, the state of Jalisco, where Guadalajara and tequila are made, Mexico City, of course, Mexico State, the state surrounding Mexico City, Nuevo León, that's what Monterrey is, and a couple of NGOs, Céspedes, that would be the local environmental private sector NGO, EDF, that's the Environmental Defense Fund, ICAP, the International Carbon Action Partnership, and AIDA, the International Emissions Trading Association. That would bring to the whole exercise a sense of we're going to do it as realistic as possible, and the goal is to create the strongest capabilities possible, again, within the Mexican private sector, envisioning that not only Mexican commitments go to North America, but also to the Pacific Alliance countries. I don't know if you're aware, but there is an existing free trade agreement between Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Chile that involved a carbon declaration a couple of months ago that calls for carbon pricing. So we would be very excited to work with our partners, and we're already doing that with some stock exchanges down in South America, to help creating instruments that would comply with our obligations under the Paris Agreement, and at the same time will help us integrate our economies. So remember, not only seeing carbon pricing as an obstacle, but also as a vehicle to integrate economies. Moreover, when we approach the most 2020, that's where the Paris Agreement comes into force, more countries will develop carbon pricing mechanisms. It's better to be prepared than not to be ready at all. So that's all. Thank you very much.
Carbon pricing as a vehicle to integrate economies. It's a good word to remember. Also, the discussion whether a carbon tax or an ETS is important, but Mexico quickly realized that having one of them and then discussing whether others can come. So they started with a carbon tax, and they're going to have an ETS coexisting. And by the way, about a quarter of the jurisdictions that put a price on carbon, they have 2 systems coexisting. They have a carbon tax for certain sectors in areas and an ETS that allows them to integrate with the other economies. So that's why we have Europe with one ETS covering the entire continent, actually 31 countries, and we have several other examples, including the US, when we have a mechanism that combines 9 states in the US. We are lucky enough to work closely with the government of Mexico. The President Peña Nieto is very good partner, a champion, most of the events that our President Jim Kim, the President of the World Bank, organizes. We are lucky to have the full support coming from the President to embrace the agenda of environmental fiscal policies. This is a good segue. We are also lucky to work very closely with the government of Chile, who has a very interesting composition of carbon taxes that have been implemented, and I'm sure Juan Pablo will provide us very interesting details about it. Juan Pablo.
Buenas tardes, les pido disculpas, voy a hacer mi presentación en español, no en chileno, en español, así que voy a hablar lo más despacio posible. Bueno, como mencionaba, Chile ha implementado un impuesto verde que le hemos llamado, porque no solamente incluye el carbono, el CO2, también incluye contaminantes locales, producto de algunas condiciones especiales que tiene Chile, que lo vamos a ver aquí en la presentación. Esa imagen de ahí muestra nuestras principales fuentes de emisión, que son las generadoras eléctricas a través de las termoeléctricas finalmente, a través de la combustión principalmente de cobre, de carbón, algo que probablemente ustedes no tienen aquí, o en la cantidad que tenemos nosotros. Pero esas son las fuentes con las que lidiamos principalmente nosotros, que emiten carbono y emiten otros contaminantes que tienen efectos locales principalmente. Esta imagen que ven acá ustedes muestra la realidad de Chile en términos de la calidad del aire. Para nosotros es un problema muy grande la calidad del aire y probablemente ustedes han visto imágenes de Santiago contaminado anteriormente. En los años 80 fue un tema muy grande. Surgieron instrumentos específicos para disminuir esa contaminación que han sido muy exitosos y que nos han permitido mejorar una condición que por temas geográficos nunca va a ser muy buena en el fondo. Por lo tanto, tenemos que tener distintos tipos de instrumentos que permitan ayudarnos finalmente a tener un aire respirable y a cumplir con las exigencias que el mercado global nos está haciendo respecto del carbono. Esa imagen muestra ahí que prácticamente todo Chile está por sobre la norma de calidad del aire para material particulado fino. Por lo tanto, nuestro impuesto y nuestra forma de ver o de reaccionar respecto al carbono tenía que ir de la mano con una visión local que nos permitiera mejorar la calidad del aire también. Bueno, lo que vemos acá es que las distintas agendas globales, los compromisos de Chile tiene distintos compromisos respecto de este tema. Está en el Acuerdo de París, tenemos un compromiso de reducir el 20% de nuestras emisiones de carbono para el año 2020. Esa reducción probablemente no va a ser muy importante en el contexto mundial, producto que nuestras emisiones son muy pequeñas. Pero sí es muy importante para nosotros mostrar esa realidad, producto que el efecto del cambio climático es muy relevante en Chile. Chile es muy vulnerable respecto del cambio climático y por lo tanto ese es nuestro principal motivo para reaccionar de una manera que incluso va más allá que el ETS. Nosotros hemos generado un impuesto verde, que es un impuesto al carbón, que probablemente va más allá y que es difícil también de explicar al mercado privado, etcétera, porque le incluye cada vez más restricciones. Nosotros tenemos muchas normas de emisión. Las termoeléctricas, las fundiciones de cobre, que es nuestro principal producto, tienen límites de emisión que les impiden tener emisiones importantes. Aparte de eso, esas fuentes también están incluidas dentro de las que pagan impuestos verdes. Por lo tanto, hay una regulación bien importante sobre ese tipo de fuentes. En general, el mercado ha estado conforme con esta implementación y, bueno, les voy a mostrar más adelante, se han realizado mucho trabajo en conjunto para explicar la manera en que se va a implementar este impuesto y principalmente el sistema de MRV, de medición, reporte y verificación. Nosotros tenemos dentro de este impuesto verde también se incluyeron las fuentes móviles. No es el principal, pero en Chile los vehículos que se venden nuevos incluyen un porcentaje de pago por una única vez al momento de la venta, calculado con un estudio de las emisiones y el rendimiento del vehículo. Eso está implementado ya y ya se está llevando a cabo. Pero lo importante para nosotros es este impuesto verde, que tiene diversas complejidades y novedades, como yo les mencionaba. Es probablemente uno de los pocos que también incluye contaminantes locales, lo que lo hace complejo desde el punto de vista de la medición y de la cuantificación de las emisiones, pero que nos permite generar mejoras en nuestro problema principal ambiental, que es la calidad del aire. Este impuesto grava las emisiones de establecimientos con calderas o turbinas que tengan más de 50 megawatts térmicos de generación. Es decir, el impuesto se aplica a fuentes muy heterogéneas. Esto puede incluir grandes termoeléctricas como calderas pequeñas de la agroindustria o de las pesqueras incluso para procesamiento de biomasa, etc. También se incluyen muchos tipos de combustibles. Nosotros en la generación tenemos principalmente carbón. Últimamente también ha entrado muy fuerte el gas natural. Y las demás fuentes, las fuentes más pequeñas, funcionan principalmente a petróleo incluso, lo que hace complejo la cuantificación de las emisiones. Y como dice ahí la última parte, esto generó un importante desafío institucionales, porque este impuesto incluye la operación de distintos organismos del Estado, no solo un solo organismo el que realiza todo el proceso. Yo represento a la Superintendencia del Medio Ambiente, que es la encargada de implementar el MRV y de entregar las emisiones que luego van a ser el fondo del pago. Aquí está la forma en que se va a cobrar finalmente, la forma en que se estima el gravamen. Para los contaminantes locales, que es lo primero que está ahí, como su efecto es local, tienen una tasa de pago variable de acuerdo al impacto que producen en la población. Por lo tanto, el cálculo se realiza considerando la población de la comuna, que es una división del territorio, y la condición de la calidad del aire que tiene esa comuna, es decir, si cumple con la norma de calidad, si está cercana a cumplirla, está en el límite, o si derechamente no la cumple. Respecto de esos parámetros, hay una ponderación y los distintos valores por cada uno de estos contaminantes, que van desde $0,01 a $0,5. Esos son los pagos que se realizarán por los contaminantes locales. En estos momentos todavía no se ha realizado ningún pago. Nosotros estamos dentro del periodo en que estamos cuantificando las emisiones para que el primer pago se realice aproximadamente en abril del próximo año. Ahí vamos a tener ya la información más completa. Pero sabemos que el pago por los contaminantes locales es menor, debería corresponder a un 30%, máximo un 40% del total del monto que se va a pagar. El principal viene por el contaminante global, por el CO2, que tiene una tasa fija de $5 por tonelada emitida. El contaminante global tiene un efecto global, como lo dice su nombre, por lo tanto no es necesario ponderarlo, da lo mismo donde se emita finalmente, el efecto es global. Y abajo está el de las fuentes móviles, que finalmente no es muy relevante para lo que estamos hablando. Como les mencionaba, este es un instrumento multisectorial que incluye la participación de distintos organismos del Estado que no necesariamente están en comunicación regularmente. Por ejemplo, está el Servicio de Impuestos Internos, que ellos no tienen mucho conocimiento sobre emisiones, por lo tanto, nosotros hemos tenido que explicarles lo que significa todo lo que tiene que ver con el MRV finalmente. Y asimismo, nosotros como Superintendencia del Medio Ambiente no somos expertos en impuestos per se. Por lo tanto, se requiere una coordinación institucional y se requiere una conversación respecto de cómo implementar las distintas partes del impuesto. Y eso se ha realizado, seguimos en conversaciones, al igual como también la hemos hecho con los distintos titulares de afectos, con las fuentes que están grabadas. Aquí aparecen nuestras obligaciones, es decir, las obligaciones específicas de la Superintendencia del Medio Ambiente, que es el organismo que se dedica a la fiscalización ambiental en Chile. Y la principal es que nosotros tenemos que establecer el MRV, el sistema para la medición, reporte y verificación, y entregar esas emisiones. Y a su vez, fiscalizarlas si es que hubiese algún tipo de incumplimiento. Lo que no es menor. Como yo les mencionaba, tenemos en estos momentos 93 establecimientos, que en promedio cada uno tiene 3 fuentes. Por lo tanto, estamos hablando de casi 300 fuentes que deben entregar una forma en que van a cuantificarla, deben reportar esas emisiones y nosotros debemos verificarlas. Como el sistema incluye muchas fuentes muy heterogéneas, debimos sacar muchos instructivos. Aquí están los más importantes. Bueno, el principal es la ley. El impuesto verde, como le llamamos en Chile, viene producto de una ley, así que no es una norma. Por lo tanto, entendemos que es una idea de país que no debería ser muy modificada por los cambios de gobierno. También tenemos reglamentos asociados a cómo se aplica esta ley. Cada ley necesita un reglamento. Y específicamente en términos de lo que es la Superintendencia del Medio Ambiente, nosotros hemos estado a cargo de entregar las 3 instrucciones respecto del MRV. Existe una para la medición, hablamos de cuantificación porque no necesariamente todo se mide, también está la opción de estimar las emisiones. Luego tenemos el instructivo para el reporte de esas emisiones cuantificadas y el último, que lo sacamos hace bien poquito, es el de verificación. Con eso tenemos el sistema de MRV implementado, que es lo que más nos ha costado y que, por supuesto, que todavía necesita algunos ajustes. Este es un primer año de implementación. Probablemente tengamos que hacerle algunas revisiones de aquí al próximo año. Aquí hay solo algunas ideas sobre lo que hemos instruido en estos protocolos. Esta información es toda pública, así que inclusive desde acá se puede acceder. Muestra un poco la realidad de lo que hemos hecho en Chile, que de todas maneras ha sido complejo porque nosotros fuimos un poco más allá con el tema de los contaminantes locales. Tal vez si no hubiésemos quedado en el CO2, la estimación o el MRV hubiese sido más simple. Pero esto nos permite tener un nivel de cuantificación bien robusto que tal vez nos serviría para un futuro ETS, etc. Es aplicable finalmente. Tenemos una instrucción que establece los métodos de cuantificación, donde existen 11 alternativas para cuantificar y que se basa principalmente en mantener las formas de medición que ya estaban implementadas producto de normas de emisión ya establecidas. Por ejemplo, las termoeléctricas en Chile tienen sistemas de monitoreo continuo de emisiones desde hace aproximadamente 4 años. Por lo tanto, nosotros les permitimos utilizar ese mismo sistema para cuantificar las emisiones afectadas a impuestos verdes. De todas maneras, existen muchas opciones y lo importante es que esto se trabajó en conjunto con el rubro, con los privados. Nosotros tuvimos reuniones con los distintos interesados, les explicamos hacia dónde íbamos respecto de las técnicas y ellos también nos entregaron información respecto de lo que ellos tienen implementado y lo que es posible implementar. Solo para mencionarlo, si hubiésemos, por ejemplo, exigido monitoreos continuos a todas las fuentes, cada uno de estos equipos cuesta aproximadamente $200.000, por lo tanto, no todas las fuentes tienen la posibilidad de implementar ese tipo de mediciones. En general, solo para mencionarlo, los métodos de cuantificación finalmente están referidos a las formas principales de medir emisiones en todo el mundo. Aquí no es que nosotros hayamos inventado metodología. Tenemos el monitoreo continuo, que es el que yo les mencionaba. Está la posibilidad de hacer monitoreos puntuales, es decir, una sola vez, también en chimenea. Y la última opción es la estimación de emisiones, que también es posible. Tenemos un instructivo para el reporte que finalmente establece cómo se entrega esta información y que está muy referida a sistemas informáticos. Es imposible manejar este volumen de información a través de sistemas manuales. Estamos en pleno desarrollo de estos sistemas, ya los tenemos operativos en un 60-70%, pero cada vez más queremos ir incluyéndole nuevas funcionalidades que permitan mejorar la comunicación y la información. Por ejemplo, dentro de las próximas semanas vamos a estar mostrando la cuantificación preliminar de las emisiones de cada establecimiento. Es decir, que él puedan ver cuánto es lo que lleva finalmente. Y al último también tenemos un instructivo que permite verificar esta información entregada. Lamentablemente nosotros en Chile no tenemos desarrollado un mercado para la verificación de esta información. Mencionaba en la presentación del caso de China, que ellos tenían más de 100 o 1000 entidades que verificaban esta información. Nosotros lamentablemente todavía no hemos desarrollado eso, por lo tanto, nosotros estamos ahora asumiendo esa responsabilidad que en un futuro debería funcionar a través de verificadores externos. Pues es inmanejable para el Estado finalmente hacer eso. Y solo para mencionar y recalcar finalmente que es muy importante la comunicación con los distintos sectores involucrados en esto. Nosotros hemos realizado muchos talleres con los privados de manera de ir mostrándoles y ir acompañando la implementación de este impuesto. Y eso nos ha permitido tener un volumen importante de reporte de la información. Más del 90% de los establecimientos ha reportado la información en los plazos que hemos establecido. Por lo tanto, en ese sentido, estamos en un escenario exitoso. Debemos esperar hasta final de año, cuando tengamos ya la cuantificación completa, para entender y ver más o menos cómo nos ha ido con esa información. Así que estamos en un periodo de implementación, pero tenemos harta confianza en que el proceso está funcionando de manera positiva. Muchas gracias.
Just two very interesting numbers that we had the pleasure to work with another colleague from Chile in an event last week in Bogota. And one of the components of the carbon tax makes possible for a new industrial plant to be placed in Santiago as long as this company can support or afford to pay a $69,000 per ton of CO2 to have that plant implemented in Santiago. In other words, it makes quite clear the directions where the economy should go. Another interesting information we got out of their tax is that the $5 per ton of CO2 equivalent is a very small price, and many here would have said that it doesn't support the transition to a low carbon economy. However, it establishes, it provides a signal to the industrials and to the private sector. Since the implementation of the Chilean carbon tax for $5 per ton, the energy sector in Chile already announced late last year that they will never establish or implement any further thermal power plant in the country. It's a public statement from all energy sectors. $5 per ton, in other words, it's the signal provided to the private sector, to the economy, where the economy should be directed, should go. Thank you very much. I think we have several questions here. So for the sake of time, I would have myself several questions, but let's focus on the audience here. Let me see what we get. I'm going to try to focus on the questions to our panelists, if you don't mind, and then I will be here the whole day and tomorrow and Friday. I will be more than happy to answer several questions that are specific to me. Okay. Let me see. That's an interesting question. Da Maria Júlia Pedroso, a arquiteta. No Brasil, a exploração de petróleo é monopólio estadual, not much different from Mexico. Eu acho que agora posso falar em português. If there is any question to you, I can switch back to English. Então, no Brasil, a exploração de petróleo é monopólio estatal. Faz sentido num país com tamanhas necessidades abrir mão de receita em nome de uma redução de emissões que não seria significativa perante o perfil de emissões do país. Primeiro, eu acho que eu gostaria de entender o porquê que estaria se abrindo mão de receita. Talvez a própria Maria Júlia possa querer explicar, porque, na verdade, seria o contrário. Né? É uma situação parecida com a do México. Talvez o Eduardo poderia dizer qual a vantagem de, por exemplo, se estabelecer um imposto para uma só empresa, no caso Pemex, como que isso teria algum impacto na economia e uma transformação para reduzir essas emissões.
Claro, obrigado. Primeiro, antes da reforma energética no México, a exploração, o refinamento, o transporte, a comercialização dos produtos finais, incluindo a gasolina, era monopólio do Estado Federal, além disso, do Estado Federal. E só uma empresa era autorizada para fazer tudo isso, Petróleos Mexicanos, Pemex, a Petrobras mexicana. Depois da reforma, tudo isso é aberto gradualmente para o investimento privado. Qual o primeiro razonamento que o governo deu para a reforma? Primeiro, porque investir o dinheiro público em petróleo e gás e também subsidiar a gasolina dos carros, porque finalmente a gasolina do posto de gasolina estava subsidiada, muito subsidiada, e esse subsídio finalizou, está quase finalizando. A resposta foi não tem jeito nenhum investir dinheiro público em subsídio de um combustível que é só para uma minoria, porque a maioria das pessoas utilizam transporte público, no México e na maior parte do mundo. E a outra razão era o declinamento da produção. O México estava produzindo cada vez menos petróleo e deveria investir mais dinheiro aí, dinheiro que é muito precisado na saúde, na educação do país. Então, abrindo para o investimento privado esses setores da economia, não somente ia criar mais empregos melhor pagos, e também, além disso, focalizar em outras áreas de governo, que finalmente está acontecendo. Finalmente, também, de acordo com o imposto carbono é para a produção e a importação de combustíveis fósseis. No México, até hoje, só tem um produtor, Pemex. O ano que vem já temos 2 produtores e depois vão incrementar. Isso também vai abrir o espaço para a coleta do imposto, expandindo a produção. E, definitivamente, o modelo mexicano já não era sustentável no tempo em algo que, a verdade, cada vez menos inversionistas querem investir, que é o petróleo e gás. Eu falava antes do evento, tem alguns fundos de pensão, de aposentadoria, acho que em português, no México, que anunciaram planos para a descarbonização dos portafólios. Por quê? Porque é cada vez mais riscoso, tem mais risco investir em oil and gas. Ninguém sabe onde a indústria de oil and gas vai estar em 5, 10, 15 anos. E os fundos devem fazer investimentos ao longo prazo. Então, a indústria de petróleo e gás fica cada vez mais riscosa para fundos grandes, e era uma decisão lógica que o Estado abra também para o privado investir em petróleo e gás.
Obrigado, Eduardo. Uma pergunta do setor químico. O Brasil tem uma participação, a pergunta do Adilson Fontanelli. O Brasil tem uma participação no mercado internacional de menos de 1%. Todo esse esforço em implementação de um mercado de carbono no Brasil, considerando o nosso perfil de emissões, não seria uma imposição de países mais ricos de suas regulações e custos aos países em desenvolvimento? Eu acho que eu posso começar e depois talvez uma resposta que os colegas poderiam dar a sua opinião. Eu acho que a gente tentou, ao largo das apresentações, deixar claro que, independente da sua participação no mercado, o interesse é do próprio país em poder, de maneira eficiente, migrar a uma nova tecnologia. Muito possivelmente, a situação de um mercado, a criação de um mercado regional que está se estabelecendo, por exemplo, das Américas, que ligaria desde o Chile ao Canadá. As tecnologias implementadas por esses países, a gente não está falando aí de países industrializados ou países em desenvolvimento, a gente está falando de uma economia regional. Esses países, utilizando as mesmas tecnologias e se atualizando em termos de eficiência, qualquer país que esteja fora, possivelmente vai ter muita dificuldade para entrar e exportar seus produtos. Primeiro, porque não vai estar engajado na maneira de verificar, de provar que as suas emissões estão sendo reduzidas. A gente pode imaginar que vai existir algum tipo de solicitação de países importadores que demonstre para que as exportações demonstrem estar condizentes com as regras do país importador. Então, eu não vejo isso como uma solicitação por parte, uma imposição por parte de países desenvolvidos. Bem pelo contrário, eu vejo o maior interesse justamente para os países que querem receber auxílio financeiro para poderem, de alguma maneira, se equiparar nesse desenvolvimento tecnológico e não terem que seguirem pagando royalties. Então, Eduardo?
Desculpa. Eu voltaria para o ponto financeiro. Quem de vocês, digamos que um de vocês tem $1 milhão e tem que fazer um investimento 10 anos, onde vai pôr os $1 milhão? Numa empresa de energia solar ou numa petroleira? Qual tem menos risco? Qual vai pagar mais e qual tem menos risco? Onde está o potencial de crescimento? Definitivamente no setor de energias renováveis. Seguindo essa tendência, que é tendência mundial, tem a maioria dos bancos do mundo que já assinaram um documento dizendo que não vão prestar mais dinheiro para a indústria do carbono mineral, coal. Temos uma tendência internacional para sair de combustíveis fósseis e entrar em geração de energia renovável. O preço ao carbono não é só uma parte de uma política. É uma política, é parte de muitas políticas que os governos devem desenvolver para atingir a redução de emissões. Talvez seja mais importante. E, principalmente, é o reconhecimento de uma externalidade que já está existindo, que já temos. É reconhecer uma parte do preço que hoje não estamos reconhecendo, que é o que nós estamos causando para o ecossistema, devemos reconhecer como parte dos preços dos produtos. temos duas alternativas. Um imposto à externalidade, como acontece no Chile, como acontece no México, como acontece em Colômbia, como acontece em muitos países, ou um sistema de comércio de emissões, que talvez seja muito mais flexível, seja muito mais fácil de atingir reduções de emissões, que temos também o recorde, o track record das reduções de emissões, e também o Estado tem o controle das metas que quer atingir conforme transcorra o tempo.
Juan,
Solo mencionar que nosotros probablemente estamos en ese caso, nuestras emisiones son muy pequeñas, pero eso no es un motivo suficiente para no adelantarse finalmente a lo que mencionaba Ricardo, que es finalmente las exigencias que el mercado va a poner a futuro. Por ejemplo, en la producción de cobre, que es el principal producto que exporta Chile, cada vez más se considera la huella de carbono, la huella del agua incluso, y eso también está incluyendo la energía que se utiliza para producirlo. Por lo tanto, la única manera de mantenerse competitivo es teniendo respuestas a esas preguntas. Y en ese sentido, Chile también se comprometió a aumentar su generación limpia, es decir, a través de energías renovables, en un 40% o 45% al 2040. Y por lo tanto, ahora si ustedes van a Chile van a encontrar muchísimos campos eólicos en diversas partes, y están apareciendo muchos más, y también muchos campos con energía solar. En diversas partes Chile tiene un potencial enorme en ese sentido, y hay una definición del Estado finalmente para ir avanzando en ese tipo de energía y, como mencionaba, eliminar la energía del carbón, que finalmente es la que ha dominado por muchos años. En general, las grandes carboneras o las grandes termoeléctricas, por supuesto que ahora no contaminan como lo hacían anteriormente. Existen sistemas que permiten bajar sus emisiones, pero lo importante es que existan los incentivos para que esa industria adquiera esos equipos. Previamente no existían los incentivos, y en eso el impuesto ha sido sumamente eficiente, porque inclusive en un año en que todavía no se paga, ya hemos visto como muchas industrias han comprado equipos para la disminución de sus emisiones con el objetivo de pagar menos impuestos, pero con un efecto finalmente en la calidad del aire y finalmente en las personas.
I think we have time for another answer. I'm going to switch to English so our Chinese colleague can help us and bring together a second question that was addressed to you. It's about the national emissions trading system. It was formulated by our good friend Jorge Soto from Braskem. We know the ETS is being implemented in several provinces, and the conclusions, which are the result, what we can already say about the outcome of those mechanisms. Is there any clear evidence of a shift in terms of highly intensive to low carbon economies? Is there anything we can say already?
I think from the research, we do not see very strong evidence to that the ETS will affect the economy. That's very weak. This is the first point. And another thing is about the leakage, the carbon leakage. There as in our observation, there indeed exists some carbon leakage in the Painel region, because it's only 7 regions. It's not the whole China. Each provinces or each panel, they have the leakage, but the leakage issue is very complicated. It's not only due to the ETS itself, but also some very strong policy implementation, like I mentioned before in my PowerPoint, they have a certain policies to reach their greenhouse emission reductions. So it's very complicated things. Yeah, not difficult, not easy to say.
Thank you. Maybe we should just complement that those mechanisms are quite recent. They have been established in the past 2-3 years, and normally you would need a horizon much longer to be able to get conclusive outputs that can be attributed specifically to one particular policy rather than a total business environment. The same happens with Europe, the EU ETS, or the emissions trading system in Europe, was established already in 2005, but in 2007-8, as you all know, we suffered a global recession, and Europe was extremely affected. So some of the emissions in Europe were reduced, not necessarily because of the EU ETS, but because of the recession itself. So it's not an easy process for you to distill what is the consequence of one mechanism or another. But we do have some very good reports coming from some jurisdictions. So Canada has, in British Columbia, and Sweden has a carbon tax that they've managed to attribute some of the pattern, the differences in economy due to their market mechanisms, and showing that the GDP and the emissions have decoupled. So the GDP has grown and emissions have been reduced. And a good way to show that, that this number is meaningful is compared to other similar jurisdictions. In Canada, in the case of British Columbia, and in other Nordic countries when Sweden used their carbon tax, which, by the way, is today the largest for CO2 equivalents, over $130 per CO2 equivalent for throughout the entire economy. So there are several differences in what we see in terms of scope, but clearly there is a direction towards economies to use more and more carbon pricing as one of the policies that they will need to finance the transition to this low carbon economy. No, there is no silver bullet. In other words, carbon pricing is not going to solve this equation. We will continue needing in the need of climate finance sources, and that's the role of the investors, the private sector investors. That's the role of the commercial investment banks. That's the role of the insurance companies. We will need concessional finance, which is the role of the multilateral institutions like the World Bank and several others that can reduce or mitigate part of the risk that the private sector is not prepared to take or doesn't necessarily want to take when it takes new investments. But the carbon pricing is the portion that the government, together with other policies, it's the role they can play to support the private sector to do what they do at best, which is finding the best way to get good, profitable investments in the technology they want to implement. I think we don't have more questions, and we actually do not have more time either. So I would love to say thank you for our panelists for the great presentations they had, and thank you very much for all the questions we have received. And I assume all of us will be here around in case you have particular questions. We are going to be more than happy to answer them individually. Thank you all.